The public hearing scheduled for 6:55 p.m. relative to the award of the sale of 16, 30, 31, and 35 Adams Street to a successful bidder requested by Craig Schmidt, property manager of the City of Waterbury. Anyone wishing to address this particular item, please sign up with the city sheriff. Mr. Sheriff, has anyone signed up for the...
No, Mr. President.
All right. With that, since it's now after 7 o'clock, we will close the public hearing with respect to Adams Street and call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Aldermen for Monday, March 9th, 2015. If everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a silent prayer.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Alderman Picoci.
Here.
Alderman Bagnall. Alderman Bernelli.
Here.
Alderman Cicchetti. Alderwoman Cummings.
Here.
Alderman DePillo.
Here.
Alderman Giacomi.
Here.
Alderman Hadley.
Here.
Alderman Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Mulcahy. Alderman Napoli.
Here.
Alderman Padula.
Present.
Alderwoman Phelan.
Here.
Alderman Ursini.
Here.
Alderman Pernaruski.
Here.
12 present, 3 absent.
We have a quorum. With that, the first item on the agenda is the presentation of Woodard and Curran with the recommendations for their completed study of the Bureau of Water Pollution Control's infrastructure needs. So we'll do that first. I don't know who's Mr. Cuevas.
Good evening, Chris Bogacki, Water Superintendent. I'm here tonight with Dennis Cuevas, General Manager, Water Pollution Control, and we're here to provide an overview of the steps we have taken to plan for the immediate and future needs of both the Bureau of Water and Water Pollution Control. The first slide points out 2 of the steps that we had to take, which was to identify our infrastructure needs and come up with rate recommendations to support those needs. The first step we took in this process was to identify each system's assets, their strengths, if you will. And in the Bureau of Water, certainly our assets are our sources of supply. We have 5 active reservoirs in our system. They have excellent raw water quality because the watershed areas are very well protected. The other thing that's important for a source of supply is, do you have enough of it? And in the water industry, we do a calculation called a safe yield, which tells you how much water you can safely get out of your sources of supply over an extended period of time, whether it's during a rainy period, a dry period, or even a drought period. Our safe yield is at 27 million gallons per day. Our average day demand over the last few years is at 15 million gallons a day. So we have a large excess of supply in our system, and that gives us the opportunity to respond to any requests for additional customers, whether it's a large residential development or a large commercial or industrial water user. The second slide is a picture of our Morris Reservoir as seen from the Pitch Reservoir Dam. And one of the things I would point out is outside of the grass, which is the area of our dam, the entire watershed is forested. This type of ecosystem provides the best protection and the best, highest quality water for the water supplies. To give you an idea of the size of our system, the Pitch Reservoir is at almost 2 billion gallons of water storage. Morris Reservoir is at 1.4 billion gallons, and our total out of the 5 reservoir system, 7.5 billion gallons. The other major asset we have is a complete conventional water treatment plant that can treat up to 38 million gallons a day. Complete conventional means it has all the standard treatment techniques in the plant, which provides an excellent multiple barrier to make sure that the water quality that we put out is of the highest quality. Thanks.
For water pollution control, we have also several assets. Mainly that we have a collection system of 320 miles of sanitary sewers. We have 9,500 manholes, and we also have 20 pump stations. The picture here on the lower right-hand side that you see is one of our largest pump station, which is the Harpers Ferry pump station, and it has a capacity of 10 million gallons a day. We also have the waste treatment plant that could treat up to 27 million gallons a day, and this is a aerial view of that facility. We are averaging normally now at a 20 million gallons a day, so we have some capacity again for future growth or expansions to other customers.
The next step in our process was to have an independent outside expert review our current operations to make sure that they're efficient and effective, to help us identify our needs going forward, and to develop rates that will support those needs. Both the Bureau of Water and Water Pollution Control contracted with Woodard & Curran to provide its expertise. With us tonight is Toby Feder, who's a professional engineer with Woodard & Curran.
Good evening. So as Chris had indicated, we were brought on board to do a series of things. First was to take a look at the existing operations on both the Bureau of Water, and the WPC departments to ensure that they were operating within the needs of the permits, within acceptable norms, and within basically the standards that are set in the industry for staffing and the like. So that was it. As a background, Chris did provide some information here. The AWWA, which is sort of a parent organization for the whole nation on water, drinking water issues, notes that the investment needs throughout the nation over the coming years are enormous. Waterbury is certainly not alone in some of the investments that need to be made. Much of the infrastructure throughout the nation, especially in northeastern cities, is well in excess of what was originally thought to be its service life, and needs to be continually updated in order to be able to maintain level of service and safe water and sewer services. And key to that is making regular investments. The idea of making annual capital renewal and capital upgrade investments is that by not avoiding them in the near term, you're able to basically avoid very large individual investments later on. There are some water and sewer departments in the Northeast where I know that north of 70% of their annual cost of service is associated with debt service because they allowed their systems to degrade to the point that just an enormous amount of investment was needed in order to just maintain the basic level of service. And I know that when Chris and when Dennis brought us in, that was one of the things they wanted to take a look at because they want to avoid that situation from occurring here. So as we said, delaying infrastructure, the big risks, water service disruptions are one of them. Obviously, when you have main breaks, you can't fight fires, you can't deliver water service to customers. The increasing cost for emergency and water sanitary sewer repairs. When you have emergencies, obviously, it is much less economical to create the repair, to do the repairs, because they're on an emergency basis. You don't have the benefits of going out for sometimes even for extended public bid and getting good bid prices. Increasing disruptions due to washout and flooding. That's incidental to the problem, but whenever you burst a large main, I can assure you that the streets will be shut and such. And then the waste of the resources themselves, as Chris had indicated and Dennis had indicated, you do have a fairly valuable excess capacity that you have in this city with your existing installed infrastructure base, and when you allow these breaks to happen as such, it does to an extent waste those resources. So the first thing that we did when we came in was we took a look at the operations. Basically, prudent management requires independent expert analysis occasionally, at the minimum, to come in and take a look at your existing operations and see if they're being run efficiently. Woodard & Kern, as a firm, operates north of 60 water and sewer departments throughout the nation, so we have a lot of experience in coming in and looking through organizational structures and looking for inefficiencies. In essence, we came and we did that on both sides, and what I can report to you is that there is not excessive staffing. There are not staffing levels that are out of either the expected range for similar sized utilities or outside the needs for your actual permits. For example, on the WPC side, within the NIPD's permit, which is the federal permit that allows you, or in the state of Connecticut, the state permit that allows you to discharge treated water into the Naugatuck River, you're actually mandated on quite a bit of your staffing requirements. And we came in, we compared your existing staffing against those requirements and against industry standards. And as I said, we did not find a lot of excess capacity. And as a matter of fact, when there are illnesses and such, sometimes we do run a little bit short on manpower resources within the city on both water and sewer. So when we came in, we, as I said, we viewed them as properly staffed. We initially completed a rate study with an original set of capital improvement projects for both water and sewer. And the resulting recommendations over the coming 5 fiscal years were for rather large water and sewer increases. This is partially due to the need to invest in the systems, and it's also partially due to the fact that we've had a declining amount of sales on both utilities over the course of the past 5 years, at the same time as we've had inflation that continues to build on the cost of providing these valuable services. So the combination of the investments, the declining amount of water and sewer service that is being sold to city residents and other customers, and just the natural inflation of contractual obligations with city employees, it was going to lead to a very large increase, as you can see there at the bottom. Obviously, we got feedback that that was going to be insufficient. They asked us to take a sharper look. So within each of the original cost of service assessments with the large percent increases that were required, we had significant capital upgrades. On the water side, we were looking at $35 million worth of investments over the 5-year period. On the sewer side, we had a much wider range, and that's associated with some degree of uncertainty in what will or will not be required as part of the NIPD's renewal process. There's going to be a large there's the potential for a large capital upgrade that was going to be needed in order to treat for phosphorus and other pollutants. As part of going back and looking, I know Dennis has been working hard to try and either delay and or find a better solution than the original $40 million solution that was included in the first rate cost of service study. And in essence, we are up against the wall a little bit as well because we do have dwindling or fairly non-existent revenue balance, or not revenue balances, but fund balances in order to fund shortfalls. So, bottom line, your current rate structures are not paying for the services that are being provided. That much is clear. Did you want to take this?
Okay, some of the ramifications of underfunding utility departments: delayed hiring of vacant staff positions, delayed capital projects, increased emergency repair costs, and decreased system reliability, and also increased public safety concerns. Here's a couple pictures of some recent infrastructure work that we did. One was the one on the left-hand side was a break on our 42-inch high-service main on Thomaston Avenue back in April of 2014. And the middle picture shows a broken 30-inch valve we removed from West Main Street. And at the same time we did that, when we had the shutdown to replace that valve, we took the opportunity to install a new 36-inch valve in West Main Street. And this is exactly the type of infrastructure work that this system needs. This utility plant in West Main Street was installed in 1895. It's 120 years old. That valve there was state-of-the-art 120 years ago, but it is no longer. And when your infrastructure gets to this age, you have three choices. You can either fix it, you can rehabilitate it, or you can replace it. And it all costs money. The next step in our process was to review the Woodard and Curran reports and recommendations. And at this point, the mayor set up a special group, the Water and Water Pollution Control Infrastructure Working Group, to review those recommendations and those reports. And Dennis and I were obviously a part of this working group, but we wanted to take the opportunity now to thank the other members of the group, Alderman Picocci, Alderman Cicchetti, Alderman DePillo, Arthur Pallone from Finance and Audit Review Commission, Mike LeBlanc, Director of Finance, Lynn McHale from Corporation Counsel Office, and Kevin Delgado, who chaired the group. So some of the things we did is we did review the Woodard and Curran recommendations, and we looked at further analysis and information. We analyzed different strategies to meet and prioritize our infrastructure needs while minimizing the rate impact. Really what we were looking for was to have a responsible program for infrastructure work, yet have it be cost effective as possible. We analyzed various funding scenarios, including grant sources, and we reviewed the different methods of pipe relining and pipe rehabilitation and the cost and benefit impacts of each. We also reviewed the collections efforts for delinquent sewer and water billing, try to make sure we were doing the best job we could. We modeled various rate impact scenarios, and we reviewed additional department recommendations on staffing reductions and organizational changes. And out of this, we developed a revised list of capital projects and a rate recommendation to support that list. Now, I know this slide is small, but the important part to look at is the original recommendation from Woodard and Curran was a $35 million capital program, and we have trimmed it down to $20 million. Yet this is still, in my opinion, a responsible program to address our infrastructure needs. It includes $1.6 million a year, $8 million of that $20 million for pipeline rehabilitation or replacement. We have funding in there for emergency repairs, critical valve work, and providing standby power at all of our pump stations. And as was mentioned in a previous slide, we did look to take advantage of any other alternative funding sources. And for the Water Department for fiscal year 16 and 17, we have submitted $7.6 million of projects out of this $20 million for the State Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, which is a mixture of grants and low-interest loans. Certainly, if we are approved for any of those, it'll reduce the cost of this five-year capital budget.
On the water pollution control side, the five-year capital was also revised. As indicated before, there was a spread of 6.5 to 41 million, and this was reduced to 11.275 million. And obviously, we are also looking at a detailed engineering study, what's going to help us determine what we're going to do regarding phosphorus. Actually, the study is also has been submitted for clean water funding for 55%. And we're also working with legislation to change the current legislation so that if, in fact, we would to spend $40 million plus for the phosphorus, that it would get 50% grant from the state and 50% loan. So we are looking at all the various different funding sources to be able to reduce our capital needs.
Okay, this next slide shows the recommended rates that came out of this working group. And on the water side, currently the charge is $2.31 for 100 cubic feet of water, which is equivalent to 750 gallons. That would go up over this 5-year period to a total of $2.52, which is a 21-cent per 100 cubic foot increase. And again, we're trying to keep this to be a responsible program, but one that's still cost effective.
On the water pollution control side, there's an increase. Not next year. What's being proposed next year is to do without the winter quarter average for next year. So that's why you see a 0% increase next year. And then the following years, as you can see here, a 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4, totaling a 16% increase over the 5-year program.
And they also, as part of some of the metrics that we did, we also tried to take a look at your historical rates in Waterbury to put into context. Obviously, with inflation, the value of any given set of rates goes down over time due to the inflation, the increases in cost in the actual operating budgets. As you can see, this is a chart that basically shows the Waterbury water rates. As you can see, we really haven't had any rate increase whatsoever since 2010. Obviously, there has been a erosion on the value of those rates over time, and that's been coupled with the reduction in sales volumes over that same period. To give you some context on where your existing rates are in comparison to other similar communities in the area, basically this shows Waterbury, highlighted in yellow obviously, against a number of other municipalities in the area, and some of the basic metrics, the service charge, which is your standardized quarterly charge, along with the individual volumetric rate, meaning the amount you have to pay for every 100 cubic feet, which is 100 cubic feet, just for the record, is 748 gallons. So basically, coming out of this, you can take a look at the average annual household cost based on an assumed level of usage. And what you can see is that Waterbury water rates actually are providing a significantly lower overall annual household cost at the current level in comparison to many of the surrounding communities. After the increases would go through, obviously, I think we would still be at the very low end of this scale, assuming that the aldermen decide to implement this plan. Similarly, on the water pollution control, your sewer use rates, and this is the consolidated rate, as it's called, where we're adding both the capital recovery charge as well as the user charge together. What you can see is that obviously they peaked right after the large construction project that occurred in 2000, and they've come down somewhat since then. But regardless, they've been flat since 2007. That's 8 years in which I can assure you the value of the rates has been eroded by inflation. And similar to the water side, since they're billed off of metered water use, the WPC also has had a loss of some of their what's known as billed consumption, basically the amount of water that you're billing for sewer as well. Similar to the slide for Waterbury Water, the WPC here has, we've prepared a slight comparison against some of the other surrounding towns. Again, similar. You are at the very low end of the scale of similar communities in this area. And after the increases, we will again be at the low end of the scale. Even if we are maybe above 1 or 2 local communities, we'll still be quite low in comparison to certainly some of the other towns.
Okay, this last slide shows the impact of these proposed rate increases to the customers year by year. And again, on the water side, the total increase is a 9% increase, which would equate to an additional $18.88 per year for a typical single-family house, $1.57 a month. Again, we tried to keep these as cost-effective as possible.
And on the water pollution control side, the total increase over the same time period is $48.50. As you can see, on the first year, though, that I mentioned, that the winter quarter average would be eliminated. There is an estimated cost of approximately $20 per customer on that same year, and it is only an estimate because it has to do exactly depending on the estimate or how much they use during that year. Also, the $48.50 actually comes down to $4.55 a month of an increase over that, again, the 4-year period that we're referring here to. That is our presentation.
Does anybody have any questions? Alderman Giacomi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming down tonight. I think there can be a lot of disagreements in this city. I think most people in this city would agree that water is very important and that our water infrastructure is a very important asset to this city. So in anticipation of this, I have a few things that hopefully you can enlighten me on or questions that you can answer. The first thing, just to clarify, the rates that we're talking about, now this is a proposed rate increase, but Woodard and Curran, their recommendation was for a larger increase in rates, and the city said no, correct?
Well, that was the work of the special working group that
Right.
the city put together to try to look at the overall reasonableness of it, to see if there was a way that possibly we could still have a responsible program for the infrastructure, but bring it down to a little bit lower rate impact.
Right. And now looking at the memo that was provided to us from Woodard and Curran, I mean, it's pretty explicit that everything that's discussed in this memo is based upon the request of the city. But the thing that troubles me is, as I look at some of these numbers, at least from a finance and budgetary standpoint, is that it seems pretty clear that at the rate recommendation of that working group, if you will, the city's desire, the city's proposal, that both the Water Bureau and Water Pollution Control by fiscal year 2019 would be running pretty significant deficits under this analysis in this memo, correct?
Well, that could be, but there are other factors that can come into play here, additional efficiencies we might have. As I mentioned, we both are applying for grants and reduced costs for the program. We're hoping to see a rebound in some of our revenue or sales.
Certainly, I mean, certainly there's many variables, and they are addressed, but I mean, one of them I wanted to address, but that is correct. According to this memo, according to the analysis of Woodard and Curran, at the rates that, quote unquote, the city desired,
Yeah.
that according to their projections by fiscal year 2019, the Water Bureau would be running about a $730,000 deficit, and Water Pollution Control would be seeing about a $9.5 million deficit?
Yes.
Okay. Now, one of the variables you mentioned was that, at least for Water Bureau, was that $730,000 would only be about 1.5% of the billings, but it could be eliminated in the event that the city sees any increase in water consumption. But in the same analysis, since about 2008, we've seen a marked trend of a decrease in water consumption, correct?
Well, we have, but in the past year, actually the past 2 years, there's been a small rebound in it. We're keeping an eye on that to see what it looks like going forward.
So I guess, I mean, that just addresses the Water Bureau. Water Pollution Control, $9.5 million deficit's a pretty big number.
Yes.
And I don't know how much we feel that even if billings were to increase, how much of a dent would even a nominal increase in billings make in a $9.5 million deficit in 5 fiscal years, and not even 3-4 fiscal years?
Just to address that very point, one of the thoughts, as I understood it coming out of the working group, one of the major cost center, it's not a cost center, but one of the major costs associated with providing WPC water service is paying off a very large bond that occurred in 2000. In 2020, that bond will come mature. That's around $4.9 million a year, which will no longer need to be raised. And so in the interest, my understanding of the city's desire was in the interest of stabilizing revenues at a level that can support increased investment without driving, basically driving up rates as the initial, when we talk about our initial recommendations, those were preliminary, they were never finalized. When the city heard about them, they decided to set, where we were thinking in order to basically set rates currently. I think they wanted to take another look at that. And so what you see in that memo is basically Woodard and Kern's analysis of what the city is proposed to do. And the idea being, after fiscal 2020, you're going to be running a significant surplus in WPC and over the several years thereafter. So if you're right that we're running an annualized maybe $2 million deficit in certain years leading up to that, the issue being once we get past the bonding maturation, the WPC economics long-term look much better.
Then I guess the question then is why not include, rather than a 5-year analysis, a 10-year analysis to demonstrate that perceived or anticipated improvement? I mean, I think you understand where I'm coming from when I look at the document in front of me and it says fiscal year 2019 and I see a $9.5 million deficit. And you're told, well, what you don't see is the years after that, the out years, when it'll be much, much better. Well, you're right, I don't see that. I guess why not include that further analysis?
I was just asked to provide a 5-year projection.
So you provided what you were asked for?
That is correct.
Okay. Which I guess, I mean, kind of leads me to the next point or question, which is, if we're going to raise rates, then why, and I'm not sure if this is for the working group or for the gentleman here from Pollution Control and from Water Bureau, if we're going to raise rates, why just simply raise them to a certain level that forces us into deficits for the next 5 years and hoping that in years 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, in the out years, that we realize some surpluses? I mean, a lot can happen in the next 5, 6 years. Why not, we hired a consultant to come in, experts in the field, and they make a recommendation. What was the thinking behind taking their recommendation and saying thanks but no thanks? Well, for whoever might be able to answer.
There was obviously a lot of people involved in the committee, and there was a lot of give and take as far as where they wanted to see the rate. So I think when there was a consensus regarding the members, the consensus was that they wanted to see a 25% increase during this 5-year period. And so now we're confined to that percentage. And so we had to make that work.
Okay. Now, the other thing I noticed, and it raised the question, but the question was sort of answered later in the presentation, is on one of the first several slides, one of the things you talk about is prudent utility management, and requires things, periodic assessments by third parties, proper asset management, evaluating if adequate rates are in place. And the question that came to mind was there any other analysis done as far as any other financing scenarios other than raising rates? And then I saw later on in the presentation, this is one of the things that the consultants with the working group did was analyzed alternative strategies to meet and prioritize infrastructure needs of the departments and minimize rate impact requirements, analyzed various funding scenarios including grant sources. Can you tell us what that analysis revealed? What are some of the other strategies that ultimately were, I mean, very vaguely touched upon, but the thrust of this so far, from what I'm hearing, what I think people are hearing, is that we're going to raise rates. Now, we talked about, well, we're going to pursue maybe some grants and we have some other ideas. What are they? And can you fill that in those gaps, if you will, and give us a little details on some of the analysis about the other various funding scenarios?
I talked about one, which is clean water funding. So there's monies available for clean water funding on the water pollution control side. There's the avenue of bonding, obviously, so that we could actually spread the cost for these capital improvements over many years, and that's one of the recommendations actually of the working group, was to bond most of the capital improvements so that we are able to pay it off over time. So that's one.
So that would be bonding in addition to a rate increase?
That's bonding. That is included as part of the capital improvement plan.
Okay. So we're talking about the proposed rate increases as well as bonding on top of that, correct?
Well, bonding is part of the rate increase structure.
So paying for the debt service with the rate increase. Okay. I think that, and I apologize if maybe that was unclear to me, but I've been looking at this the past few days, and I wasn't 100% sure of that. I mean, the reason why I'm asking is, and I'm glad this slide was included towards the end, the graph about water rates over the last several years. Because one of the things I've been hearing, and I even heard it on the radio today, and perhaps it was said in a little bit of the heat of the moment or hyperbole, was that the city hadn't raised rates in so long we were neglecting our infrastructure. And within 10 minutes I was able to go on the Republican American website and find several articles talking about a 14.5% increase in 2006, a 3% increase in 2007, a 7% increase in 2008, and then I believe a 5% increase in 2009. And then in 2010, talking about discussions of more increases. And then in 2011, a proposed 10% surcharge, which did not pass, but it was discussed. So over the last several years, there's been numerous increases. And I guess the question is, now we come back, we talk about our infrastructure, which I think we all agree is in crisis and needs to be addressed. I mean, the thrust of this presentation, it seems to me, especially with the pictures, was to sort of maybe convince people, hey, we need to do this, our infrastructure needs help. I think everyone agrees with that. I think what people are troubled by is, how are we going to pay for it? And unfortunately for me, what I feel like the response we're getting tonight is sort of the same old shrug of the shoulders, need to raise rates. What other, besides you talked about, now there's some bonding built in, some other scenarios. One of the things I raised from the mayor's office a couple weeks ago, and maybe this has been discussed, I'm sorry it's a little late in the game, but I know that the federal government through CDBG grant funding and through public facilities grants through CDBG, that some of this can be addressed. Was that discussed at all? Has that been discussed? Is that something that you guys are familiar with, and what are the thoughts about that?
Sure. We have discussed grant programs. The one thing you can say for certain about grant programs over the course of the past 5 years is they've become incredibly competitive. And in order to make a financial projection, it is not prudent to include the assumption of grant funding from a very uncertain source.
But it has been discussed.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the idea, I know that our firm, as well as Dennis and Chris, have both advocated for some of the bills that are currently under consideration to increase the grant share of some of the state revolving fund programs. So they've been active in trying to do the best they can, but from the standpoint of assuming we're going to get CDBG or economic development or some other grant that is incredibly competitive, it wouldn't be a prudent thing to include in a financial projection.
Now, is this something, maybe in your professional opinion, that something like a CDBG grant fund, pursuing that, or some of these other scenarios, is this something that the city should have been pursuing a long time ago? Is it something we had been doing but should have been doing more of? Or do you feel that we've done all we can and we have no choice but to raise rates?
I can't speak to that. I don't know what their pursuit of CDBG or other grant funds has been in the past or even in the present.
Is it something you would recommend going forward?
Yes, I mean, anytime you can get grant fundings, obviously grant funding is a great panacea when you're trying to fund capital things. From the standpoint of chasing an unlimited amount of grant funds, though, so many of the grant programs as they currently exist are funded at quite low levels that it does become onerous to chase everything, is the only thing that I can say.
Okay. And the only, I guess, final point / question, I'll admit it's more of a point, but I've been pretty good lately, so. Those of you who follow this board know that one of my pet peeves is the comparisons we always get. And once again, we get told, well, Waterbury, look at our rates as compared to New Britain and the New Haven area, or look at our sewer rates as compared to Meriden, Stamford, and Bridgeport. But what we don't see on this slide is the overall tax burden, including a mill rate. And we can talk about New Britain, and they have slightly higher water rates, but they have a mill rate of 49. We have a mill rate of 58.2. We talk about Bridgeport and Stamford and their sewer rates. And now, look how much higher Stamford's sewer rate is. The Stamford's mill rate is 24. Waterbury's is 58.2. So, I think you understand where I'm coming from in combination with being told that for the last how many years we've neglected, but I know we've passed rate increases. And I know that in the past, these rate increases, which we were told was to address the critical infrastructure needs, went to things other than infrastructure. So what guarantees do we have now that rate increases are going to go towards what we're being told they're going to go towards?
I can't speak to your second point, but I'm sure they would like to. On the first point, the only thing that I can say is the average bill is a useful metric when you're talking about enterprise-funded utilities, as we have here, because the average bill of a homeowner is directly related to providing a service, and that service is regulated by the same laws in Stanford as it is here in Waterbury, and it is a financial metric that is independent from a mill rate based on property values. That's the only thing I can tell you.
No, I agree with you from a technical analysis standpoint. I think a lot of people, though, unfortunately, the checks are all coming from the same bank account.
Undeniable.
With regard to guarantees of money that is funded going only to particular projects, as we've discussed here, much of this will be bonded either by the city or by grants we get from the state, and that money would be earmarked towards the particular type of project that we're looking to fund. So there would be control in place to keep the funding where it needs to go.
Now, where the past, and now I'm not wrong, correct? I mean, we saw the chart, I have the articles. There have been rate increases, several, over the last several years, correct? So for anyone to say that we've neglected our infrastructure and haven't raised rates in the last 15 years, that would be false.
No, you are correct there, but since 2010, we have now raised the rates, and you have to understand, with an infrastructure program, you have to commit yourself to spending the money you need to on an annual basis. You can't do it for a year or two and then say, well, we don't have the money, so we're not going to do it. You really need to make a commitment.
We need to spend it on infrastructure. We had 4 straight years of rate increases, only in some cases it didn't go completely towards infrastructure, which I think upset a lot of people.
Yeah, that I wasn't here, and I'm not real familiar with the past history, but...
And now, something else as well. We have a lot of, as you know, interlocal, intermunicipal agreements. We've talked about, we debated in here, Watertown, Wolcott, different things like that. These, now, I don't know, perhaps the Corporation Council or you has the answer to this. With these proposed rate increases, is there language built into those agreements whereby they would raise their rates in amount commensurate to what's being raised on the people here in the city of Waterbury?
I'm not an attorney, but I am familiar with the various agreements that they have with the other municipal systems. And yes, there is a mechanism in place for when we have a rate increase here, that it is reflected in the rates that they pay to us also.
This is just a technical point. The way that our agreements, as I've read them, read, it doesn't necessarily make their rates increase. It does increase the bill that you're sending them. So when your rates increase, the size of the bill that you issue to your consecutive systems goes up a commensurate amount. Whether or not they decide to raise rates in order to fund that, I think that's an extra municipal, outside of Waterbury question. But indeed, the amount of revenue that the water and WPC departments will raise goes up equivalently.
But now there's no mechanism in place. I think I already know the answer, but just to have it on the record, there's no mechanism in place for rate equalization, whereby we say, you know, we're raising rates on the city of Waterbury, and we're raising them in such an amount over the next several years that these agreements that we have with other municipalities need to be equalized in order to sort of mitigate the cost for the entire system. That's not something that's legally possible, correct?
That would be a question for Corporation Council, but I've never, having reviewed a lot of intermunicipal agreements, I've never seen something where a consecutive system agreed to increase their internal rates based on whatever the actual providing community did. It's always it's provided on a fee-for-service basis.
So, again, getting back to your previous point, then it would simply perhaps increase the bill we send them, but it certainly wouldn't equalize the rate. And I mean, perhaps I'm extrapolating too much, but I would imagine that their profit margins would probably be a little bit better as they're paying a lower rate, even with an increased bill. I mean, our rates are going up, and I would imagine that their profit margins would be a little bit better than ours because they have that lower rate? Or is that too much of an assumption?
If I understand you correctly, I think there's a lot of assumptions built into that statement. When you issue them a larger bill, their internal cost of service, meaning if I'm one of the consecutive towns and Waterbury increases its bill by 7% to me, I would presume I would need to raise rates if I want to break even. But I don't know the internal operating economics of any of the consecutive systems here. I only have reviewed how you issue and calculate the bills that are sent to those customers.
Now, and I promised my last question, it was actually suggested to me by a constituent, so I promised I would ask it. Is there any benefit, is there any positive, any thought, anything that you could enlighten us as far as studying or exploring turning the, well, I know they're both enterprise funds, but in creating a water authority, or perhaps a regional water authority like you have in other parts of the state? Would it, in your opinion, would we be able to realize any sort of financing savings, efficiency savings? Would that affect any of our interlocal or intermunicipal agreements if we spun it off into a separate authority? Or is that something that really would be more trouble than it's worth, if you know?
We haven't looked at that at all. What I can tell you is, usually assuming that the member communities are appropriately staffed, there isn't usually a large degree of savings by uniting everyone under a single umbrella. What I can say is by adding additional customers, if the city is able to do that with you have excess resources beyond what you need, obviously your costs in operating a water and a sewer utility are fairly fixed. The variable portions of your budget, things like chemistry and electricity that are based on flow, is a fairly small percentage. Your salaries, your debt service, all of the big number items in your budget are set at the beginning of the year and are irrespective of how much water and or sewer service you sell to the customers in Waterbury or outside of Waterbury. But the more that you can sell outside of Waterbury, the less we need to raise inside of Waterbury in order to basically fund operations.
Right. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further questions, Alderman Picoci?
No questions, Mr. President. I just like to we agree, just to let Alderman Giacomo know that the working group, the committee that met, had asked every single question that you did, and when we met with them, and it was like this. It was like listening to a tape recorder, and I'm glad you asked them so that we weren't the only ones that knew all the answers to the questions. But just to let you know, we did ask the question. The only one we didn't ask was about the water authority. I'll give you that one. But we did. We asked all these questions. We asked about, why the money didn't go into the infrastructure when we raised the rates. Alderman DePillo and I kept hitting on that one. And we also asked them about make sure that the bond money goes strictly for the infrastructure and nothing else. And we got the same answers. So just to let you know that we did do our due diligence. We were there. We did ask all the questions before we came up with this scenario to send back to the Board of Aldermen.
Further questions? Alderman Padula?
Thanks, Mr. President. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming down. I think since both the billing and the revenue for both the water and the sewer is driven by consumption, can you explain a little bit why consumption has been going down? Has there been any analysis to why that is a trend?
The main reason is so many of the larger users, the businesses and industries that have left the city, and also the number of homes that are not occupied now.
So it's a basis of the business users being using less water or not existing anymore, so they don't draw on the supply.
Correct.
Okay.
And if we get to the point where the homes come back online and the businesses come back online, our consumption will pick up.
And that could make a significant increase in revenues.
Yes, it could.
Okay. Another question is, Dennis knows I'm always looking at alternatives and also at long-term costs instead of just the short-term, lowest bid. Has there been any analysis of possibly setting up a public service campaign that would try to convince people not to use traditional surfactants and detergents, because as we know, detergents end up in the wastewater stream, they go down the drain, suds. And not only that, they're probably the major source of the phosphates and phosphorus that is in the wastewater that ends up at the plant that we have to keep treating. Is there any analysis or any thought as to how we could reduce the amount of phosphorus going in the first place?
Yeah, that analysis was not part of this study, but you're certainly right. There are some ingredients in soaps that are phosphorus, but actually, I was speaking to another gentleman from Meriden, and they took rainwater and they analyzed rainwater. There was actually phosphorus in rainwater. So it's also a natural occurring nutrient. So you may be able to take out some of it by, like you're suggesting, the campaigns, but to the level that we need to decrease the phosphorus to, which is ultimately a 0.2 level. So no matter if 4 milligrams per liter is coming in the door, which it is at this point, and if you reduce that to half of that, to 2 milligrams, you still have to reduce it to a 0.2 level, which means you still need a large capital improvements in order to be able to satisfy the permit.
You think something like that could be cost effective as far as producing some results quickly?
There are some effectiveness by doing that, but obviously then you have to deal with the manufacturers of all these products. Some of them would be regulated either by state statute and other sources. I don't think by regulated in Waterbury it's going to have a major impact.
Okay, thank you. The only other question, I know Dennis and I have spoken, and I've had a private tour of the plant at one point with some outside people. The idea that I had thrown out there, and I know Dennis has done some research on it, and I thank him for that, because the biggest cost that we see out of all the analysis is the potential for a significant capital upgrade to the water treatment plant. And I think that's going to be driven by like federal law, basically, like you said, with the 0.2 for the phosphorus. Is there any headway in setting up a system based on algae that could be used either in a closed loop or like an algae farm? I know there's been research and scientific studies, and other countries are doing different research to remove the phosphorus, the nitrates, and also the heavy metals from the water, taking the algae afterwards that's grown significantly on those resources, and then turning it into fuel.
That's part of the analysis that we retain CDM Smith to perform. Obviously, they need to perform a detailed engineering study. And that firm actually is involved in Upper Blackstone in Massachusetts. And they do have a phosphorus recovery unit that they're pilot testing right now. So at this point, the units and the science that I know of is still in that stage where there is being piloted. But it's certainly something that we're going to be looking at as part of our study.
Thank you.
Alderman Orsini.
Thank you. The recommendations that you had for the $35 million and the $41.5 million, and I recognize that the $41.5 for the WPC was based on factors you weren't really sure were going to occur. But why wouldn't we look at the $35 million for the water budget and then plan accordingly from there so we know where we stand over 5, 6, 7 years? Meaning that if people know that they're going to get water increases, then they're going to use less water, because one of the beauties of rate increases for something like this is that people can control what they use. It's not like I'm hitting the real estate property and there's nothing they can do about it. Further, if we can see farther out, we would be able to advance or at least monitor those sinking fund factors much more appropriately. And then we can plan which projects we want to do if we have excess capital and if there's a general revenue increase and not a deficit. Was there a reason why we didn't look at that and just show everybody that as well?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question correctly, but...
Well, let me rephrase then, just quickly. I mean, it's not to be argumentative.
Yeah.
The reason is, if it's really $35 million, and we know that the average citizen in Waterbury can manage their water accordingly, why wouldn't we show them the budget for $35 million and say, this is what it's really going to cost us to do this properly and correctly?
because all we seem to do is stumble through, to a certain extent, rate increases, emergency repairs, over and over and over again. If this is really what it is, let's show everybody what it really is. And then we can decide, do we want to advance it for 7 years? Do we want to advance it for 8 years? Do we want to increase our sinking fund factors accordingly to the more prioritized projects that are out there? It's important that we need to have an overall policy change on how we see these things. And this would be very similar to what we did in healthcare, which is run very efficiently. We know what it really costs, and we know what we have to do. This is kind of, we're halfway there, we're not really there. So in 2 years from now, it's like, oh boy, I need another 40 million, or I may need less because I have revenue in. But at least everybody can see what they're looking at. I think it's just important that we can also, and Alderman Giacomi actually stated this earlier, is that we can take those hard assets and depreciate them accordingly and then fund accordingly over the life of that particular asset. We can treat it more like a fixed cost in an industry that we really are, is what we're in. We're in the water industry and we're in the sewer industry. We're not just revenues and expenses over and over again and kind of struggling to where we're going to be. So it would have been nice to see the $35 million, and it would have been nice to see the, we'll call it 30 million even for the water pollution control, so we have a better visual of where we're going and what we're going to do, rather than scale it down to be what's palatable to everybody, rather than if the recommendation is 35 million, I really would have liked to seen the 35 million. I think everybody else should have seen it too. And it would be nice to see that. I don't know if you can do that or not, but I'm just looking to how to change our overall policy of how we manage these particular two enterprises that we have, both from a revenue standpoint, expense, and as well as the fixed cost infrastructure, which is tremendous over a period of time.
Sure. Well, the rates were shown. How they would have gone up, I think it was 24% under the $35 million capital budget, as compared to 9% with the $20 million. The main difference in those two budgets is the amount of money we're spending on the pipeline rehabilitation and replacement. The $35 million budget had $5 million a year. This budget has $1.6 million a year. The $5 million budget was an attempt to catch up, because over the last 5 years, we haven't been doing what we should be doing, which I mentioned before. You have to have a regular program of spending on infrastructure. But again, in discussing this, we thought the 1.6 million is a responsible level to address the infrastructure needs. We're just not going to catch up with anything that might have been not spent in the past. So I think that's the main difference between these two budgets. And again, I think the $1.6 million is still a responsible program. Yep.
Further questions, Alderman DePillo?
Yes, thank you. I know that Alderman Giacomi brought up the issue of the bonding and the relining of the pipes. And there was much discussion in the committee about the fact that the money that was allocated for relining of pipes be used for that and only that. And I know that Mr. Michael LeBlanc, of the Finance Department, explained to us how that was going to work. I was wondering if he could come up and address that to satisfy that this money being spent to reline pipes is only going to be used for that purpose.
Good evening. Just to actually highlight a couple points, as Alderman Giacomi had referenced, the rate increase, tied to that rate increase is going to be the establishment of the funding for the debt service that's going to come about as the bond authorizations for these capital plans are approved. So to Alderman DePillo's point, as this rate increase discussion proceeds forward, parallel with that is going to be the discussion on the finalization of the bond authorizations, which are going to lay out in each of these two major bond authorizations, one for water and one for water pollution control, the specific infrastructure projects that are going to be funded through these, initially through the bond financing that is issued, and then essentially financed through the debt service that's going to come about from the rate increases. So the rate increases are going to provide the funding vehicle that's needed to, over time, deal with the debt service increase that's going to come about as we issue the bonds associated with these projects. And again, to Alderman DePillo's point, it was a major component of the discussion with the committee to somewhat provide some guarantee that to the extent that rate increases come about, that money is earmarked or specifically set aside or protected, if you will, for the purposes of the capital investment. And we're essentially backing into that guarantee by adopting, almost along the same track, the bond authorizations for these capital projects at the same time that ultimately the decision is made as it relates to the rate increases. Those bond authorizations are going to be specific in relation to identifying the projects and the amounts allocated for each of those projects. And it'll be under the essential domain of representing the 5-year capital plans for each of the 2 enterprise operations. And over that 5-year period will be the progression on these projects. And then, certainly as the city in these enterprise operations head into the back end cycle of that 5-year period, there will be a discussion of where do you go from there from a further capital investment. So to your point, in relation to, 35 million versus 20 million, ultimately it's going to be 35 million and then some that's going to have to be invested into the infrastructure. But the plan of attack would be 20 million over the next 5 years, and then this discussion will happen again, 4 to 5 years out as far as going forward with the continuation of that capital investment.
Further questions? Alderman Mulcahy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Superintendent, from what I've heard, the water collection rates are in the sewer, so to speak. What is our collection rate right now for the water collections?
To this 95%, 2013. 2013, it was 95%.
We have to have an idea of this year, don't we? 2013, or do we have anything for 2014?
Yeah, we don't have all the numbers for this year because we moved to a new billing system this year.
But do you have a roundabout figure or an estimation? Because, I mean, again, I think I echo a lot of the sentiment that's been made this evening by other members of this board. Another bond, another increase to the taxpayers, and we're not even collecting the revenue we're supposed to. So that's a little troubling to me that we have all these people not paying the rates as it is. So I just want to have a clear number, and I think we deserve that this evening.
2014, it's also 94%.
So it's gone down.
It's down a little bit.
Down a little bit. Now, my ears were ringing when you said that the decrease of consumption is attributed to the fact that we've had some businesses leave the city. Is that correct? Did I hear you right? Do you know, you probably have studied the figures and things, and so the general public knows you've only been here about a year, so I think it's really great how quickly you've been brought up to speed of all the numbers and what's going on in the city. But do you know of offhand which business that has left the city had the highest amount of consumption of water?
No, I do not.
You do not? Okay. So maybe, do you know if there's a grouping, or was there a month where you saw the consumption really decline rapidly, or?
I would have to review the numbers. I don't have them in my head.
Okay. I see that we're treating 38 million gallons, but we're using 15 million gallons. Could you explain to me why we're doing that?
We don't treat 38 million. That's just the capacity.
That's the capacity. Okay. So how many are we treating?
It would be somewhat slightly in excess of the 15 million.
Another thing I have to comment on this PowerPoint, and I think there's other members that have commented as well, it's very vague. You have a point in here that says that you're not filling vacant positions, but it doesn't say how many. How many positions are we down in the water department or the water pollution control? I mean, we could refer back to our budget book, but it's been about a year since we've done a budget, so could you bring us up to speed on a direct number?
Well, the number, as you know, is going to vary depending on when we fill a vacant position. Right now, we're probably 4 or 5 positions down.
4 or 5?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the impact of the budget for those 4 or 5 positions? And are we still encumbering the money for the day-to-day operations?
What do you mean by encumbering?
Are we still using the money from those salaries that are vacant for the day-to-day operations currently?
Well, they're in the budget, but if we don't fill the position, obviously we're not spending as much money as we have in the budget.
But one would think if you're down 4 to 5 workers with the problems we've had recently, that the overtime must be up.
Well, certainly that would be a part of it, yes.
Would the overtime be the same level as if we still had those 4 or 5 workers, or has it risen the cost to the taxpayers?
If you have a full staff, you're going to have less overtime. I don't know the specifics of how that's going to work.
So, more or less, we're probably not saving anything currently with those 4 or 5 positions vacant.
I wouldn't say that.
Because the PowerPoint makes it seem like we're saving money when we're probably not.
No, we're saving money.
But you don't know how much?
I would have to research that.
Oh, okay. Again, I think we've talked about the delays of the infrastructure, and I know my time on this board, I know there's been delays, but what do you see that needs to be done, and that's the biggest issue we have with our infrastructure in the city right now?
Well, we have a number of infrastructure challenges. We have major projects we have to do up at the water treatment plant. This year, we're replacing the filter media in the plants, that's been the same filter media there for the 28 years the plant's been up there. That's a major infrastructure job we're doing up there. Next year, we're planning on replacing the sludge collection system up at the water treatment plant. It's old, it's breaking, we can't get repair parts for it. The following year, we're planning on replacing the generator. Generator's been up there 28 years also. The other infrastructure jobs I talked about before are to finish providing standby power at all of our pump stations. Because right now, if we lose commercial electric power at some of our pump stations, we have to bring up a portable pump, and we actually pump between hydrants to replace that pump station. It works, but it's not easy. And the real good solution to that is to have the standby power in each of our stations. The big question, as you all have focused on, is what's going on underneath. And under the ground, that's the big question. We keep a list of pipes and prioritize them so that as the spending becomes available, we're going after those priority by priority. I can't say that I know, or we know, the condition of every pipe underground in the city. We find out when there's a break, and we get a look inside, and we see what it's like. We look at the age of the pipe, we look at how many breaks we've had, and again, anytime we get a chance to look inside the pipe, we'll look at it, and we'll put it on our priority list.
I think it's safe to say Thomaston Ave would be high priority.
Thomaston Avenue has, because those are our, and you have to remember, there's 3 pipelines in Thomaston Avenue. The low service, the high service, and then what we call a distribution main, which is a smaller diameter. We've had breaks in all of those over the last several years. So it's not always the same pipe that's breaking there.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know, as I said before, you've only been on a short time, especially with the other members that you probably serve with in your department. But I know you were around for the last budget process. So can you enlighten me, what capital projects did you request last budget cycle that were supposed to commence this year and have not been able to because of lack of funds?
None.
None, okay. So did you request any capital projects last budget cycle?
Yes, I did. That would be the filter meter replacement. I had 1 pump station standby power requested last time, and I had $960,000 requested for pipeline rehabilitation.
Okay, both projects are completed?
They're not completed, but they're in the process.
In the process, right. Okay. How far along?
The water treatment plant filter media replacement will be done this spring. We've done one project for the pipeline rehabilitation, and we're planning a number more this spring when we get rid of this freezing temperatures.
Right. All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you for all your answers.
Yep.
Any further questions?
One simple.
Just one
For
simple
Mike.
question?
Yeah, it's for Mike. It's simple. Mike, and I meant to ask this before. The bonding that was discussed, do we have an idea or a plan? Is it 20-year, 25-year, 30-year bond? You know, do we have an idea of how the bonds we'd try to be floating, the time frame?
If they're standard GO bonds, it'll be a standard 20-year. Generally, the underground infrastructure, the major infrastructure type work, easily extends out a useful life well beyond the 20 years, but there's a cap of 20 years as far as the duration that we can amortize the debt. Some of the equipment components may not extend out useful life out to 20 years. For those, we'll establish the debt period based on the useful life of those assets.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Anything further?
Right.
With that, I'd like to thank you, but I can't solve your mystery of the reduced water usage. Not that many years ago, I had 3 teenage boys living in my house. 2 of them have moved on. If the third one ever leaves, you're going to have a real problem. So thank you very much for your time this evening. With that, we'll go to public speaking. Anyone who wishes to address this board, please sign up with Mr. Conway, our city sheriff. Please state your name and your address for the record when you come up to speak. And there's a 5-minute limit. I will give you a 1-minute heads up. Mr. Sheriff, if you call the first speaker.
First speaker from 14 Quinton Street, Steve Schraggs.
Good evening. My name is Steve Schragg. I live at 14 Quinton Street. Like many people in many neighborhoods in Waterbury, we have a problem in our neighborhood. Some people have problems with sidewalks. Some people have problems with crime. We have a problem with not having a stop sign on the corner of Spring Lake and Jersey Street. We've tried a lot of things to get this stop sign, so far unsuccessfully. But I must tell you, I get more attention from my state representative and my state senator than I do from the alderman regarding the stop sign. And I think I know why. Because they represent a district. And that's what all the aldermen should do, is represent a district. We need districts that make sense, and there's 2 criteria that I would put forward to you. One is that whatever district we pick, they meet the Voting Rights Act criteria, and the second thing, they do the minimal amount of dislocation of where people vote. And that is, they should vote in the same place in even-numbered years as they do in odd-numbered years. Because I've seen firsthand that when you change polling places, it's very easy for people to get confused and discouraged. So I guess my suggestion to the board is that you reject the first plan that was proposed regarding the alderman districts, that you either pick the Butler plan or Plan 3. Both meet that criteria that I laid out, and this will move us forward so that everybody in this room, when they have a problem in their neighborhood, they know who to call. Thank you.
Next speaker from 62 Avalon Circle, Richard Wood.
Good evening, everyone. And once again, we have our ministers here to support us. And by the way, we meet on a regular basis, so you're welcome to come visit us more often. We're all concerned about our aldermen by district. We've all seen the plans, the Butler plan with its 2%, and the other plan with, I believe, is 10%. I think when we analyze it, we need to have coverage and stick with the 2% factor. I spent some time the past couple of weeks with my abacus and a pencil and paper trying to see if there's a better way, and it seems like the Butler plan does fall into the area that would interest us. The thing is, we can't get perfection. Somebody's going to be unhappy. The bottom line is, this is a democracy. It's going to work one way or the other, and if we participate, we make it work. That's the basic bottom line of the plans. They all have merit in different ways from different viewpoints. We need the minority factor given consideration, because this is a historic period of time. Some of you remember 50 years ago and what happened. And this meeting here tonight is a form of culmination of the effort of that period of time to make certain things work. And the alderman by district puts the voting power back in the hands of people the way they want it. So I think you have a few things to think about. And by the way, the NAACP is meeting a week from tomorrow, and you're all invited to give your opinion and to work with us, with the city to make it a better place. Thank you very much.
Next speaker from 14 Quinton Street, Aaron Schraggs.
Good evening. Aaron Schragg, 14 Quinton Street. Back in August, this whole process started, and there was lots of controversy then, and clearly it's continued. I guess I would encourage this board to come together as a group, Democrats and Republicans alike, and vote for something unanimously. That's pretty much what happened in the city of Waterbury, the voting districts on this plan. I think only one district had more votes nay than yay for alderman by district. So I think Waterbury has spoken, and obviously that's why it's in front of you today. So I would encourage you today to come together to figure out whether it's Plan Butler or the third revised plan of Morrison, and vote for something together. And let's stay unified at Waterbury. Thank you.
Next speaker from 905 Pearl Lake Road, Lisa Lassard.
Good evening, Lisa Lassard, 905 Pearl Lake Road. I'm here tonight in accordance to Alderman by district. Yes, I voted for it, and yes, I rallied for it many, many years ago, as well as present. What I want to say is, basically, we do not want the first plan. I repeat and be clear, we do not want the first plan, because if we have the first plan, we have Alderman at large with another name as Alderman by district, so that one's out, as far as I'm concerned. Basically, I live in the 75th district. We have never, ever had anybody sitting on the Board of Aldermen since I've lived here 15 years ago. And I don't care if this person is African American, Latino, Caucasian, Albanian, Italian, Irish. We just need someone representing our district, within our district, for our district. And believe it or not, that has not happened thus far. I'm going to repeat something that Alderman Stephen Giacomi said when he was talking about the water. Basically, we had Mr. Morrison here and Mr. Casagrande here. I believe his third plan is the workable plan. Because I'm going to repeat Mr. Alderman Stephen Giacomi. You hired him, you wanted him here. The mayor hired him, he wanted him here. You will be saying thanks, but no thanks if you don't pick his third plan. My theory has always been hope for the best, plan for the worst. We end up in court, what's going to happen? We're going to have, basically, if we have Mr. Morrison's plan, he will be standing behind his plan. Why will he be standing behind his plan? Because his plan equalizes and is closest to the law as the law presently exists. Let me repeat, to the law presently exists. We have the Butler plan, which he says is the Waterbury plan. Believe it or not, the Larry Butler plan is close, but Mr. Morrison's plan is closer to the laws as the laws presently exist. And if you want to follow the law and stay out of court, or if we do go to court, Mr. Morrison can fight for it. Every factor. But if we have the other plan, Mr. Butler has to go, and he has to represent. And the first question they're going to ask is, why did you have Mr. Morrison, who has all this experience, come in front of you, that you trusted, that you wanted, and then you ignored and said thanks, but no thanks? We didn't listen to you, we didn't want it. Well, we the people are saying third plan because it's the closest to the law as the law exists. Speaking for myself and no organization that I belong to. Thank you.
Next speaker from 41 Pilgrim Ave, Jimmy Griffin.
President of the board, Jimmy Griffin, 41 Pilgrim Avenue. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you for all your service in the city of Waterbury. I'm a little disturbed because I've been hearing that for some reason, I'm out to divide the city, and that's not the case. The case is that it seems to me that when African Americans show up, when they do show up, it seems like it doesn't make a difference whether they show up or not, yet people urge them to show up. Earlier on, I had mentioned, the possibility of a lawsuit. Well, let me just say this. It's been a long time and a hard struggle for all of us. And it took 20 years of long, hard work to get this done. Having aldermen by district versus the at-large system is really the overriding issue right now. Not an expensive, drawn-out lawsuit to improve minority voting strength. I urge that the board move forward and adopt some plan to move forward, because I think that we've exhausted all possible arguments and remedies. And at this time, I'd just like to say thank you for your hard work.
Next speaker from 96 Down Street, Martin Spring.
Martin Spring, 96 Down Street. I had a few issues I wanted to talk about before Alderman by district. When you guys have that sewer presentation, I hope you guys are going to have a public hearing, because I sat here for over an hour waiting to speak. And I don't mind that, but I really wish you guys have next time, have a public hearing or set a public hearing for us, because being taxpayers and homeowners, we have a right to voice our opinion. I'm not saying we never do, but we have a right to come down here, and I appreciate what all the aldermen are concerned about the taxpayers and increase, but we still have a right to be down here, and I really wish you people would have a public hearing, and I hope you're going to have one on this, because it includes bonding or grants or whatever it is. And I always love when they use that terminology, government subsidies, grants, whatever, bonding. It's still taxpayers' money, no matter which way you slice the bread. Okay, as far as aldermen by district, I live in Waterville, and I'm vice president of Waterville Community Club. I'm also, as Richard knows, I'm vice chair on the Waterbury Human Rights Commission. And from my way of thinking, the way I feel is that it's good that we all voted for aldermen by district. I did, and I'm glad I did, because I think it's going to be a good thing for Waterbury. It's historical, and I believe a lot of people agree with me on that. But we also got to remember, a long time ago, I remember when, after previous Republican administrations, I'm not here to knock anybody, but we did have people running for the independents, and Alderman DePillo knows that we had 5 independents who won, and for aldermen at large, and that was with aldermen at large. It was 5 independents who won, and we had 1 Republican, Alderman Paul Cicchetti, who's not here tonight. And I wish he was, because I was going to talk to him about this downtown and the parking business and stuff like that. But the bottom line is, that just goes to show you how our republic works. And people say we live in a democracy. We live in a republic, which means we vote our people into office, our government, whether it be federal, state, or local. That's what we live in. We don't live in a democracy, or maybe democratic, but the bottom line is we still live in a republic, and people got to understand that. But again, what I was saying is, when I was working at the polls a long time ago, and I'm not saying this to be mean-spirited, but there was a lot of times, a lot of people, especially for some reason, with all due respect, within the minority community, they didn't show up to vote. Would it be Hispanics or blacks or any other nationality or race? I mean, they just didn't show up to vote. I don't know why. Maybe they felt as though they weren't going to be represented. So I'm just saying, I'm really glad we're having aldermen by district, because now there's not going to be any excuses. I want to see people come out and vote, because it's our government, and people should be involved in our government, and that's the bottom line. As far as this downtown turns hostile, and what I did want to say was, when I go to Thomaston a lot, and there's parking up there. I'm glad the mayor's here, and they got the old meters, but it's 5 cents, okay, for half an hour. And I spoke to Alderman DePillo about this, and it's 10 cents for an hour, and it's, I believe, 25 cents for 2 hours. No, I'm not indicating we have to do that, but still, you think about that. If we turned it over and we lowered the prices,
instead of going down there. I actually went down to pay my taxes and paid it in full, which my bill was well over $3,000 in a condo. And here they do, they want to go up on the sewer rates and water rates, whatever, and they're constantly going up. And my bill was high, and I had to go down and pay it because I want to be a good taxpayer, okay? Not that I can afford it.
1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Not that I can afford it, but I went down, and then the missus stayed out in the car. This is when they had the brand new meters, the COLA meters, and, you know, I was really concerned about getting a ticket. And thank God she was out there, but one time I went out, and I was by myself, and I believe I mentioned this to some of the aldermen, and Mr. Orsini, I mentioned that to him, and I got a nice $20 ticket on my car. I couldn't believe it. And I said, you got to be kidding me. You know, what's next? They're going to boot my car? Anyways, the bottom line is, you guys should look at other places out of town. And by the way, I want to just say, when we do our reenactment up in Litchfield, up and down the green, would be Revolutionary War reenactment or Civil War, I know they mark the tires. If you guys ever been up there, that's what they do. And I don't understand Waterbury. It seems like we want to be a good business place for people to come in, and yet, you know, it seems like we're chasing businesses out of town, and I don't think that's right. So I only hope that you guys do what you got to do. And again, I'm so happy to see a lot of people here today of all nationalities and races, that we got to all come together for the betterment of the city of Waterbury. Thank you.
Next speaker from 30 Madison Street, Gerardo Reyes, Jr.
Thank you, Sheriff. Recognizing the chair and the alders tonight, thank you very much for your service. Gerardo Reyes, 30 Madison Street. Just wanted to take a few minutes. We've been at this for quite some time about the Alderman by district. The way I look at this, the fact that on the election, the voters spoke and said they wanted Alderman by district. I think that those of us that wanted Alderman by district have already won. We're now splitting hairs and adding costs and aggravation and energy, expending energy that's really nothing more than spinning our wheels. At this point, I like to see the Board of Aldermen move forward with a decision. I am in support of the Morrison plan. I do not believe that the percentage points that we're talking about are going to make a difference one way or the other. And the reason I say that is, having been a person that has gone door to door, knocking on people's doors, making phone calls, and realizing just how hard it is to get a vote, this is all about getting a vote out. Never once has, and I'll speak about the Hispanics, which is what I caucus with, never once have we come close to maximizing our vote. It's a non-issue. It's about getting out the vote. So I ask respectfully for the Board of Aldermen to do the right thing, get a plan passed, and let's move forward. Thank you.
Next speaker is State Representative Larry Butler, 70 Blackman Road.
Good evening, President Pernaruski and honorable members of this Board of Aldermen. I'm here just to, again, talk about the plan that I put forward, taking under consideration the voters in the city of Waterbury. The question on the machine was, do you favor Alderman by district plan 3x5, closely following the state representative districts? That's the plan that I put forward. 9,000 people supported that. Now, we went through the process, and Dr. Morrison came up with a variation of that thing, and that's fine, because you have two decent plans to choose from, which is a good thing. But there's certain neighborhoods that need to be fixed in the Morrison plan. There's the East End, the Bully Manor. I think town plot coming into Brooklyn section, an area along the 72nd district boundary from Upper Fulton over to Bully should be looked at if I were to tweak this further. But the Waterbury plan, Butler plan, I think would accomplish that. There's 5 aldermen here from the East End, and I know it's very important for you going forward to look at this and represent those people going forward. It's going to make a big difference. So I just hope that you pick the plan that the people of Waterbury voted for, those 9,000 people. Now, if you want to pick the Morrison plan over the Waterbury plan, and you like the neighborhoods or you like the way it's been constructed, I can accept that. But people who talk about lawsuits, there is only a 1% difference in them. And the Waterbury plan is drafted with the state representative districts. When's the last time anybody sued the city on those lines? Not my lifetime. So what makes anyone believe that it would happen now? So if you think the Morrison plan is better, by all means, accept it. But there's a viable alternative that I believe has the least amount of impact to the rest of the city, and I hope that you will select it because you'll be putting in place a solution that works for the whole city. So again, I thank you for your deliberation. I know that you're going to come up with something good. But I really have confidence in you, because this has to work for the city of Waterbury. And I think everybody's going to look at that and do what's right for the city of Waterbury. Thank you so much for your time.
Next speaker is from 116 East Farm Street, Clifton Petaway.
Clifton Petaway from 116 East Farm Street. First, giving honor to God, and then to respect Mr. Chair, to the Mayor, to the Board of Aldermen members. First, if I can, I want to give thanks to those members of the African American community. And I just want to take a minute, even historically. I think yesterday President Obama gave a very eloquent and very passionate and a very historical speech last night. And so with that being said, I also would like to thank those who made it possible today for us to get to this point. And so 20 years ago, Cicero Booker, I know he's going to be upset me mentioning his name, but he's not here, and so much thanks to him, even Jimmy Griffin and David Gilmore, and in the black community, and also Larry Butler, who gave us the design to the demographer. We also like to thank him. And so whatever plan that does come out, we in the African American community, we had a right to say that we wanted the maximum. And so please don't be offended. And I know at this point you will make the right decision, what's best for all of Waterbury. And so we would have to accept that. So 5 years down the line, we would have to make adjustments. We can evaluate the process. But again, it's better than what we have, and eventually we'd like to see the 15 by 1. And so we're going to be optimistic. But again, thank you all for your efforts.
Mr. President, that's the last speaker tonight.
Thank you. With that, the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. The first set of minutes is for the special meeting of Tuesday, February 17, 2015. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Made by Alderman Picoci, seconded by Alderman Lopez. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. The second set of minutes are for the regular meeting of Monday, February 23, 2015. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Made by Alderman Picoci, seconded by Alderman Lopez. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved for that regular meeting. Mr. Mayor, did you want to address the board?
Good evening, Mr. President, honorable board members. I have two topics I want to discuss with you tonight, one of which is the much discussed sewer and water plan And I just want to take a moment to commend Alderman Bacocci, Cicchetti, and DePillo, as well as FARC member Arthur Pallone. These guys spent an awful lot of time working on this project since last September, had numerous meetings, numerous discussions, numerous debates, numerous research done by all of them. And I really got to tell you, they did great work, and they worked very well together. Some great questions were asked here tonight by several of the aldermen. Is this enough? Is this the right approach? Are we comfortable? Certainly with taxpayers in mind, the committee was trying to ease the pain as much as they possibly can, which of course is commendable. I publicly was a little bit concerned, quite frankly, that if we were going to be going through this whole exercise, is it enough? Alderman Orsini's point was, and I was thinking very much like he was, so we just go ahead and adopt the recommendations from Woodward and Curran. Having said that, with assurances from Superintendent Bogucki and Cuevas, they feel it's a good start. They feel that we're going in the right direction. These are decisions that probably should have been made some time ago. We have seen so many water main breaks over the last 10 years that have cost us an awful lot of money. I'm not suggesting that all of those breaks would have been prevented had we started a mitigation program, but it certainly might have helped. So I feel confident that we're going in the right direction. I'm still not entirely comfortable that it is the right amount that we're asking for, but I'm sure that you all can decide that amongst yourselves. I am relieved to hear that the water consumption rate for the last 2 years is starting to come back. As you know, that's directly tied to the revenue. So I think that's a good thing. And I hope your last son doesn't move out of the house for a while, Mr. President. But I really, I don't know that the taxpayers of Waterbury recognize the amount of time and effort that these aldermen and Mr. Pallone put into this project, and I wanted to make sure that we publicly recognize them. Lastly, I want to tell you that for the very first time ever, I talked with Dr. Morrison today. I have not been involved in discussions with Dr. Morrison before today because I really didn't want me, as the mayor, to be perceived as interfering in this process in any way, shape, or form. The reason why I called Dr. Morrison today is because I've received a number of inquiries from Booley Manor residents and other constituents in the East End, and had conversations with Alderwoman Ann Phelan today. And I wasn't quite clear on what Dr. Morrison's position was on the exposure that the Butler plan, you can call it the Butler plan, the Waterbury plan, whatever, the plan that is not Dr. Morrison's plan, what exposure the city would have if the matter were to be litigated. And I was a little bit surprised, quite honestly, by some of his remarks, as I did explain to him that I was very concerned about that Booley Manor area, as well as taking St. Peter and Paul Parish and that school area out of the East End. So I'll share with you, because I feel I'm obligated to share with all of you, what Dr. Morrison said to me on the speakerphone with Corporation Counsel Linda Wibby in the office as well, and she was taking notes as well as I. So Dr. Morrison stated the following: while he feels his plan is 99% defendable against any litigation, he thought that the Butler plan was 97 or 98% defendable. He stated that his plan is slightly more perfect than the Butler plan. But he also stated, quote, "I would not feel hesitant defending the Butler plan." We went back and forth on Bully Manor and, the importance of Bully Manor as its identity to the East End section of Waterbury, and the St. Peter and Paul area, which I have to acknowledge he wasn't as familiar with the location of St. Peter and Paul area, but I think you all would agree that that's probably considered to be the heart of the East End of Waterbury, at least it is in my mind. And I said to him, I'm really trying to do the right thing. I've stayed out of this thing from the beginning. Let the process work. Let the people speak. And it was clear that the Bully Manor people really felt slighted by this final Morrison plan. And I said to him, if you were the mayor, what would you do? He said, quote, if I were the mayor, I wouldn't be fearful of either plan, end quote. And lastly, Dr. Morrison stated to me, quote, I would not be displeased if the board adopted the Butler plan over mine. However, I will reiterate to you that my plan is 99% to the letter of the law for the Voters' Right Act and all these other things. So that seemed to me to be a little bit different than what was presented here. And I felt very obligated to tell all of you while you were thinking about this tonight. For me personally, I'm not going to tell you which plan I prefer because I think that's your job and I don't want to influence any of you. But I did think that those comments were important enough for you to hear tonight. Mr. President, I know we don't normally do this, but if anyone had a question, I have another engagement to be at, so I've got to get going pretty quickly, but I didn't want to leave here and not offer anyone to ask me any question about that conversation today, if there were any.
Does anyone have any questions to the mayor with respect to that conversation with Dr. Morrison? Surprisingly not, Mr. Mayor.
Now that would
They're
be
talked out on sewers tonight, so.
That would be a miracle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With that, let's take a 10-minute break before we come in. What we're going to do when we come back is, I think, unless there's an objection, we'll refer the old business item number 2, the redistricting report, to the committee of the whole. But let's take 10 minutes before we come back and do that, okay? All right, thank you. Okay. At this point, we'll return to the regular order of business. And with respect then to old business, item number 2, I would entertain a motion to refer to the committee of the whole.
So moved. Second.
Who made the motion? I'm sorry.
Kochi.
Oh, made by Alderman Picoci, seconded by Alderman Lopez. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And then I would entertain a motion that we resolve ourselves into the committee of the whole.
So moved.
Made by Alderman Padula, seconded by Alderman Lopez. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Whereas committee of the whole. Then the question before the board is the recommendation of the redistricting committee with respect to the map to be approved for the beginning with the November 2015 municipal election. The 2 maps on the table, just for purposes of shorthand, that came as a recommendation from the committee are the Butler map and the Morrison map. At this point, I would entertain a motion with respect to one of those 2 maps. Alderman Picoci.
Mr. President, we make a motion that we accept the Morrison plan as submitted by the committee.
Second.
Motion having been made by Alderman Picoci and seconded by Alderman Cummings. Is there any discussion? Alderman Padula.
Thank you, sir. As most of you know, I'm not really a fan of splitting the city into wards or districts. I don't know if I speak for anyone else. When I decided to run for this position back in '09, I really wanted to represent the whole city. So this is a really sad time for me to have to vote to split the city into pieces. I don't think it's going to accomplish any good. In fact, I think it's probably going to be detrimental to the city as a whole. I apologize also to my friends all across the city that I spent a lot of time with over the past bunch of years as your alderman, because as fall goes according to the plan with this districts, during election time and during the year, I'll be spending most of my time in my newly drawn up district. And you probably won't see me very much in other places. I think that's the design of this, unfortunately, the design of this district composition of the 5 districts. That said, the city did go out and hire an expert, apparently a nationally known expert who has done lots of line drawing in other places. And I think that we should probably abide by his latest revision. I don't think it's much different from the plan advanced by my friend, Representative Butler. But I think that the expert, his qualifications and his plan should win out, I think, in the long run. I'm also saddened because I believe that this plan put before us, all the plans, were rushed. The night that we voted to send it to the voters and put it on the ballot, I had thought that we could delay the implementation, at least by 1 election cycle. And I think that would have been a very reasonable thing to do, but apparently a procedural error, I guess, early on with the districting commission had the thing take effect at the next election. I think that was a mistake because this whole process of setting up districts should not be about me or any of the other aldermen that are currently sitting here. I also believe that the 4-year term for mayor should not be about the current sitting mayor. It should also be about the process, not the person. So I think both of those things should have taken effect 4 years down the road, give us time to actually figure out what the implementation would be like, give time for people to move their residences now. You're going to be forcing people to move if they want to hold on to their seats. I think it causes a lot of dislocation and disruption. And then in the end, it's going to pit all the neighborhoods and our aldermen ourselves against each other, while giving additional authority to the mayor, since there'll be a divided opposition against him, whoever that mayor is in the future, because the aldermen will be focusing on their little districts instead of the city as a whole. So again, I think it's a very sad time for us here in the city of Waterbury. I hope that some of my predictions don't come true, but I am going to be supporting Dr. Morrison's plan. Thank you.
Further discussion? Alderman Orsini.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you all know, I have been supportive of the Butler plan. And I did so because in the East End, which I'm an East Ender, my parish is St. Peter and Paul. My sister organization, I'm the membership chair for the East End Community Club, is Bully Manor. All of these factors came into play that, in effect, put me in the mindset of acting and voting as an alderman with a district and not at large. So I put the interest of the East End, which my constituents wanted me to, in order to advance their interest and to protect their interests. And the Butler plan was the best plan for the East End. It was the best plan for the constituents of my location in the East End. And more importantly, it was probably the best design for the spirit of what we were trying to accomplish with the alderman by district. It kept the neighborhoods intact and some of the voting locations more consistent. It allowed for coalitions between various organizations within the district as well as other districts, because remember, Bully Manor would be cut in half either way to a certain extent, so we'd be able to work together with the 75th. I thought that Dr. Morrison made a compelling case. Clearly, the threat of litigation, as articulated by the mayor today, was not generally a factor, as once we all thought, and I think I had articulated that and explained that early on. But I think for all of us here on this board tonight, here's an opportunity for you to vote as an alderman by district, representing the district that you're in, and keeping those constituents in mind, because that's what we were charged to do. And here's an opportunity to do it right now. So I am voting for the Butler plan. Thank you.
Further discussion, Alderman Phelan.
Thank you. I, too, am an East Ender, and I would echo Alderman Orsini's sentiments. I support the Butler plan because of the neighborhoods. Bully Manor and the area around St. Peter and Paul School and Church has always been considered East End. And for them to be now cut and put into a new district, I don't think serves anybody correctly. And I think it would be very difficult for the voters to come out and to figure out who they're voting for. Is this a state representative election, or is this a mayor or alderman's election? I think it just becomes a problem, and we'll see less people coming out. I think we're going to see some neighborhoods torn apart. You know, historically, the Bully Manor and the East End Community Club and the Neighborhood Association and Bully Manor have worked together on projects. Not to say that they couldn't work together on other projects, but this is how they're known. This is how they associate. And if that's what the intent of the districting was to do, I think it's being destroyed with this plan. Now, the comments that were made about the potential litigation, and also a previous newspaper comment that we did hire a professional demographer, did weigh heavily on me. And why would we spend this money getting professional opinion just to cast it aside? Until last meeting, when Mr. Morrison got up and said, and I heard, and he said that both plans could be adequately defensed in a court. When he said that, and the minuscule difference in the amount, that swayed me to keep Bully Manor and St. Pete's in the East End, and that is why I will support that plan. Thank you.
Further discussion? Alderman DePillo?
Yes, thank you. I did attend every meeting of the district committee, and obviously have talked to a number of people and listened very carefully to what the public had to say the last two meetings we had on this Alderman by District plan. And I also listened to Mr. Morrison, and last week him saying that if this plan were challenged, that he would in approximately 4 hours put together a defense that he actually turned to the attorney, Mr. Casagrande, and was very confident that they could weather any challenge to this plan. With that being said, and with the speakers that I had heard at the district committee, and even those before us today, the Morrison plan seems to give a little better representation to the minorities here in the city of Waterbury, which is what they've asked for. Not a tremendous amount, a little amount. In addition to that, I have to look at the fact that this being brand new plan in the city of Waterbury, a challenge to this plan could come from an avenue that we're not even considering at this point. And I would feel much more comfortable based on what Mr. Morrison had to say at the last meeting to us, the entire Board of Aldermen, and that weighs more heavily on my decision than what was said by the mayor this evening. And for that reason, I'll be supporting the Morrison Plan 3.
Further discussion, Alderman Cummings?
Thank you, Mr. President. I am also an East Ender. And it seems to me that no matter what map was put forward, the East End as we know it is not remaining whole. The map for Mr. Butler puts East Mountain, which is also traditionally known as East End, into a different district. It seems that the East End is carved up no matter what. And I agree with the sentiments of my fellow aldermen who are saying that the city expended substantial funds on hiring this demographer, someone who is nationally renowned for his work. And I think that speaks volumes to what the end goal is here. So that is why I'll be supporting the Morrison map.
Further discussion? Alderman Phelan?
Thank you. I just want to go back and just say that, as the mayor alluded to earlier, I did have a discussion with him today, and I said to him, told him then that I was going to be supporting the Butler map because of what Mr. Morrison had said at the meeting, the public meeting last week, when he said, right there, standing there, that he could support the Butler plan. As soon as he said that in response to Alderman Lopez's question, that changed my mind. He said right then, and you can go back and check the minutes, and what the mayor did, and you can go back and check the record, and he said that his plan is better, but the Butler plan could also be, it was just slightly less better, and could also be defended very well if there was any possible litigation. With that being said, there was no doubt in my mind then as to which plan I was going to support. Thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none, since this is the committee of the whole, I just want to take a moment to talk about why I'm going to vote the way that I will this evening. I think this is a very difficult choice, but that's what we ran for office for, was to make some difficult choices. And I think at this point, at some point in the future, it may be that I will represent a district, but at this point I've been elected still as an alderman to represent the entire city, and we've gone through a process. Alderman by district was voted on, and we're going to do it, and the question comes down to which map in the end are we going to approve. One of the things that played heavily on my mind in voting this year to send the question of alderman by district to the voters was the folks, the ministers, particularly the concerned black clergy who came out, and many from the African American community who came out with a great feeling of being disenfranchised. And we can all discuss whether that should be or how other ways to do it, but the fact is that that was a true feeling that they held, and it was what drove a lot of my decision in this case. And now we've come here with these maps, and we're trying to draw lines that are going to make everybody happy, and I think we all know that we're never going to make everyone happy. Out of these maps, I don't think any of them are perfect, but one of the things that we heard, again, especially from the concerned black clergy at our last meeting, was a concern that there's a feeling in that community still of disenfranchisement under some of these, the two maps that we're considering this evening. I don't think it's possible for us to go back to the first map. There were a lot of flaws with that map, and I think that probably did the most harm to all of the districts, and the neighborhoods in the city to create those districts. So I really think we're focusing on these two. I think one, the slightly better at bringing the minority community together and enhancing their voting. I don't think it's a significant difference, and I'm sorry that that's the case, but those, I think, are the two real choices that we have, and I think that we need to try to maximize that. I think what we're really talking about here are communities of interest and how we define them. Are they geographic communities? Are they cultural communities? Are they historic communities? And we've got to sort of balance all of that out. The other thing that concerns me as we go into this, it's a new process that we're going to be entering into. I agree with Alderman DePillo. I think we may face challenges, and I don't know that we necessarily know where they're going to come from. And it's very likely that the most significant challenge would not come from within a Waterbury, and I don't think that it has to. And so I understand what Dr. Morrison has said today, but I think that what's been on the record over the course of this process has been a continuous representation that his map was the best map that he could do under the circumstances without doing significant harm to the neighborhoods. And if that's the record, I would hate to walk into court as an attorney with an expert witness when the first question that the other side is going to ask is, but was there a better plan, however slightly better that plan may have been, if we're facing that choice. So I think none of these are perfect solutions. I know that they're going to do some, there's going to be some damage, as Alderman Cummings said, to the neighborhoods no matter which plan we go with. But I think under the circumstances, with the expense for the expert, with how this process is laid out, and with the fact that it does, even if it's just slightly, a better job of giving a voice to the minority community, that it's the Morrison plan that does that, and that's the plan that I am going to support this evening. With that, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then, the motion before this board excuse me, is to approve or accept the plan put forward known as the Morrison plan. A yes vote would be to approve that plan for the municipal elections beginning in 2015. A no vote would be to disapprove that plan, and we'll do a roll call.
Alderman Picoci.
Yes.
Alderman Brunelli.
Yes.
Alderwoman Cummings.
Yes.
Alderman DePillo.
Yes.
Alderman Giacomi.
Yes.
Alderman Hadley.
No.
Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Mulcahy.
Pass.
Alderman Napoli.
Yes.
Alderman Padula.
Yes.
Alderwoman Phelan.
No.
Alderman Ursini. Alderman Pernaruski.
Yes.
9 yes, 3 no, 1 pass.
Do you have a vote, Alderman?
Yes, the vote I have is no.
Okay, so
9 yes.
9 yes, 4 no. Right? No, I'm missing.
Yep, that's 13, right? Okay. 9 yes, 4 no. The motion to approve the Morrison plan passes. With that, since that's the only item in the Committee of the Whole, I'd entertain a motion to come out of Committee of the Whole.
So moved.
Made by Alderman Padula, seconded by Alderman Napoli. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We're back as the regular order of business. At this point, as the chairman of the Committee of the Whole, I would report to this board that the Committee of the Whole recommends that this board adopt what is known as the Morrison Plan with respect to redistricting for the 2015, beginning with the 2015 municipal elections. Is there a motion with respect to that recommendation? Second. Made by Alderman Picoci, seconded by Alderman Lopez. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, a yes vote would be to approve the Morrison Plan, a no vote would be to disapprove the plan. Let's just do a roll call so that everybody can be on record.
Alderman Picoci.
Committee of the Whole.
Alderman Brunelli.
Yes.
Alderwoman Cummings. Alderman DePillo.
Yes.
Alderman Giacomi.
Yes.
Alderman Hadley.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Mulcahy.
No.
Alderman Napoli.
Yes.
Alderman Padula.
Yes.
Alderwoman Phelan.
No.
Alderman Ursini. Alderman Pernaruski.
Yes.
10 yes, 3 no.
The motion carries and the Morrison Plan is approved. With that, before we go into committees, I would just like to note that item number 12 from the Finance Committee with respect to the Retiree Benefits Advisory and Brokerage Services, we've been asked to hold that and to hold a special meeting in order to take that up because it's a complicated issue and they wanted to be able to spend more time on it than we could do tonight. So with that, item number 12 would be held tonight and it will be the subject of a special meeting which will be held next Monday, March 16th at 7 o'clock in the evening, and notices will go out with respect to that. With that, we will go in. Alderman DePillo.
Yes, I was wondering if item number 8 and 9, which are both received on file, could be, as a motion, referred to Finance. Can I get a second for that?
Second.
Motion having been made and seconded to refer items 8 and 9 to Finance. To what end, Alderman? Let me just ask you that. There's no approval on these, right?
Well, there isn't. There was a number of questions that came up regarding some of the disbursement of funds and some of the procedural matters on number 8. And there was an issue brought up regarding...
All right, since you have questions on it, let's do this. Because they were received in place and file, I don't think anybody's prepared to answer your questions this evening, so it doesn't make any sense to send those anywhere tonight.
Yep.
We'll hold those on the committee for next meeting, and we will have a period in which we can ask questions, understanding that there's no vote that can be taken on them, okay?
Fine,
so
thank you.
8 and 9, even though they're received in place on file, will be held and carried over as old business on the next agenda. With that, why don't we go into committees? There's not a lot of items. Let's do everything just out here. I think there's one for intergovernmental and then Finance. We'll do them first and then go to Finance. Thank you.
Okay.
They're going to do them first, and then we're going to...
Call the Intergovernmental Committee to order. Our item tonight is item number 6, amendment number 2, contract extension request with Aaron Associates of Connecticut, Inc. for the water treatment plant SCADA system upgrade project as submitted by Christopher Boguski, Superintendent of Water.
Yeah, right. We're going to do these all together.
Yeah, they're all looked at. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion made by Alderman Napoli, second by Alderman Padula. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Voted and so ordered. And item number 12 has been held, and that concludes our business for the evening. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
That was quick.
Ernie.
You all set?
There's a presentation that could be made for these items that are regarding Omni.
I think we're all set. We're all set.
Okay.
We're all set. I think we're waiting on Tony. Okay, I'd like to call the Finance Committee in order.
I'm yelling at you for once.
We're going to do items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all together. Your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve a sanitary sewer agreement and easement with Omni Development Corporation for Warner Gardens housing projects as submitted by Dennis A. Cuevas, PE General Manager, WBC. PC, I'm sorry. Item number 2, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve a community sewage system agreement with Omni Development Corporation for Warner Gardens Housing Development as submitted by Dennis A. Cuevas, PE General Manager, WPC. Item number 3, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve an access and utility easement agreement with Omni Development Corporation for Warner Gardens Housing Development as submitted by David Simpson, Deputy Director of Operations of Department of Public Works. Item number 4, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve an access easement agreement with Omni Development Corporation for Warner Gardens Housing Project as submitted by David Simpson, Deputy Director of Operations for Department of Public Works. Item number 5, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve a water system agreement and easement with Omni Development Corporation for Warner Gardens Housing Development as submitted by Christopher, I can't pronounce that one. Bogi or something. Superintendent of Water, Bureau of Water. Motion? Is there a motion? Discussion? Yes.
Just one question. Are the meters, the water meters, we're going to have individual water meters for every condo that are there? Or is there going to be one? You know, this is the same question that we've been going through in the committee.
Right now, as planned, there would be an individual meter for each building, not for each unit. And there would also be, in at least one of the buildings, a private fire service line that would go into the building. Okay. There would be, the way it's currently planned, a single meter for each building. And there's also a private fire service sprinkler system for one or more of the buildings.
So we can't get each building to have their own water meter, like we discussed in the committee.
Linda Wibby, Corporation Counsel.
Hi, Linda.
Good evening. I don't want it to go without being said that representatives from Omni Development are here. And because of the financing, and they have specialized financing, and I don't mean to speak for them, they intend to keep title to the property. They are not selling it, and they, Omni Development or its subsequent managing company, will be paying the water bills, not the tenants, pursuant to their financing arrangements. That didn't help. You're not smart.
No, only the reason we're asking this is Alderman Pillow and myself. We sit on that committee, and all these condos that go under, and they stick us with the water bill, and we're trying to figure out. We discussed that if we put individual water meters in, it's really not that big of an expense, right? We asked. And then somebody else would be liable, the homeowner, not the company. So the company wouldn't be liable, the homeowner would be.
Joe, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Joe Cappy. I'm president of Omni Development Corporation. One of our funding requirements from the Connecticut Housing and Finance Agency is that we put one meter per unit of buildings. We are paying the utilities. It is not a co-op. It is a rental development. We're paying the electricity, and we're also paying the heat. Okay, so we have no problem with the bills will be in Omni Development Corporation's name, so you don't have to chase anybody. And, it's our intention. We've been working with the city. We've been working with the water department. We've been working with the sewer department. We're just trying to get this thing closed. All right, we paid, and I'm sure that you know, that we paid a large overdue tax bill, water bill, and sewer bill in excess of $500,000. We're not running anywhere. We're not going to say we're going to convert these to condos, because they're not condos. We're not building them as condos. We're building those as rental units. And they will remain rental units for 40 years.
Sure, I'm not saying that you're running away or you're going to. It's just a thing that's come up in the past. We've had meetings on this, and we discussed it at our last meeting of the water pollution. And one of the questions was, anytime we build anything like this anymore, can we put separate water meters in so that the burden would be off of you, sir, and on the renter?
Now, the distinction here is there's not going to be an association of owners who owns the bill and who has become delinquent as in the past, and as in fact happened with Warner Gardens.
Right.
The association itself did not collect enough money to pay the water bills. And so they were delinquent and filed bankruptcy. And when Omni came in, and Omni took over, Omni Development came in and bought out the association. They paid $525,000 of the bankrupt debt of Warner Gardens and paid it in full in December, and they've been maintaining it as current. There is no separate association here that's responsible for the water, just the owner and the management company of the rental units. It's a little bit different than others that I also know that we have been trying to collect. The legal issue there is you can't lien the individual units. You can only go after the association, and it becomes very difficult to try to collect from the individual owners when the water bill is in the name of the association. And I understand that here, the water bill and the responsibility is all going to be in Omni. There is a distinction, however slight that might be, at least for 40 years.
Further discussion? All those in favor of items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Those that approve?
Aye.
Disapprove? The ayes have it, and the motion carries.
Yeah, we got standing. Okay. Bear with me.
And one more. We got standing. And standing. 10. I didn't see 10 then. Oh, yeah, standing. Item number 10. I don't see item number 10 in here. Yeah, I got it. Yep. My God. Okay, item number 10, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve refunds for overpayments totaling $9,963.42 for the following individuals submitted by the Board of Public Works. St. Patrick St. Joseph's Church, Holler Law Firm, Waterbury LLC, Access Rehab Centers, Lucille Cydia, John and Helena Ology, Marilyn and Jody Rogat, Truman R. Keys, Century 21, Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, Gamanti and Japal Chandarara. Second. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. No business, all these go down here. Standing. I think we got to do this. Standing. I think. Open. Oh, business. Your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve the sale of 1630, 31, and 35 Adams Street to a successful bidder as submitted by Craig Smith, Property Manager, Office of the Director of Finance. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Standing Committee, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve and authorize the Director of Finance to make refunds to taxpayers representing overpayments of tax bills in the amount of $19,763.67 as submitted by Frank A. Caruso, Jr., Revenue Collection Manager. Is there a second? Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. This is old business. Leaving on the standing. Okay. This is good.
Okay, we'll return to the regular order of business. The following items are on the consent calendar. Item number 1 is on consent with the sanitary sewer agreement easement with Omni Development Corporation for the Warner Gardens housing development. Item 2 is on consent for a community sewage system agreement with Omni Development for the Warner Gardens housing development. Item number 3 is on consent for an access and utility easement agreement with Omni Development Corporation and the City of Waterbury for the Warner Gardens housing development. Item 4 is on consent for an access easement agreement with Omni Development Corporation for Warner Gardens housing development. Item 5 is on consent for a water system agreement and easement with Omni Development Corporation for Warner Gardens. Item 6 is on consent for an amendment number 2 contract extension with Aaron Associates of Connecticut for water treatment plant SCADA systems upgrade project at no additional cost to the city. Item 10 is on consent to approve refunds of overpayments totaling $9,963.42. Well, so hold it. Did you guys do anything with old business 1 or 3? Number 3? Number 3 is on consent to approve the sale of number 60, number 30, number 31, and number 35 Adams Street to the successful bidder, which is Neighborhood Housing Services. Is there a motion with respect to the consent calendar?
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Picoci and seconded by Alderman Brunelli. Is there any discussion? Any changes? Hearing none, a yes vote will be to approve, a no vote to disapprove. We'll do a roll call.
Alderman Picoci. Alderman Brunelli.
Yes.
Alderwoman Cummings.
Yes.
Alderman DePillo.
Yes.
Alderman Giacomi.
Yes.
Alderman Hadley.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Mulcahy.
Yes.
Alderman Napoli.
Yes.
Alderman Padula.
Yes.
Alderwoman Phelan.
Yes.
Alderman Ursini. Alderman Pernaruski.
Yes.
13 approved consent calendar.
Consent calendar passes as read. With respect to standing committees, the chair would recognize Alderman Hadley.
Mr. President, your Finance Committee respectfully recommends that the Board of Aldermen approve and authorize the Director of Finance to make refunds to taxpayers representing overpayments of tax bills in the amount of $19,763.67 as submitted by Frank A. Caruso, Jr., Revenue Collection Manager.
Second.
Made by Alderman Picoci, seconded by Alderman Lopez. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The refunds are approved. Is there anything else? With that, Alderman Brunelli.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'll send the notices out, right? Just as a reminder, there's going to be a special meeting. The notices will go out this week, but a special meeting next Monday just to deal with new business item number 12. Thank you.